Hello, I'm Bart, and I'm a traumatic brain injury survivor. My traumatic brain injury resulted from a car accident when I was 16. I just turned 37 a few months ago. My brain injury was so severe that doctors believed I should remain in an institution. But instead, my parents decided to take me home and try different ways about handling it. My parents brought me to hyperbaric oxygen, which is what I feel really helped me out tremendously. Today, I live in my own apartment in Delmar, New York, and I've made new friends and decided to move on. My dad wrote a book about my recovery entitled No Stone Unturned. It's in college libraries all over the world, including here at Siena. Recently, our family started a foundation to advocate for alternative therapies for brain injury survivors. It's called the Brain Alternative Rehabilitation Therapy Foundation, or the BART Foundation in short. The name is strictly just a coincidence, so thank you very much for the laughter. Hope you have time to check it out. Check out our website, www.thebartfoundation.org, and find this work for some use. Thank you for inviting us here today, and here's my dad, Mr. Goldstein.
Thank you, Bart, for the introduction. Thanks to Dr. Mohana for inviting us back to Siena. We love Siena. Right? Our daughter is a 2012 graduate. Our dog, who I hope you have a chance to meet afterwards, Nico, is a regular. He's a certified therapy dog, and he's been to many events in Siena. So hopefully you'll get to meet him afterwards. So go Saints, we're glad to be here. I'd like to, before I start, just ask a few questions. Show of hands. Has anyone either suffered a serious brain injury or have someone in their family who has? Okay, so they're all set. Yeah, sure. Well, welcome. You're almost on it, yes. And is anyone either working in a field or training for a field where you would be serving that community? Thank you for coming. Thank you. All of you. Well, I'd like to do three things today. I'd like to tell our story, which Bart has already begun, Doc Mo as well. I'd like to share some lessons, some strategies that we have figured out along the way, ways of coping and managing with long-term caregiving. I'm hoping each of you can pick up something new. We'd like this to be enjoyable and edifying, but frankly, we'd like it to be useful. And I hope each of you can learn something that you may be able to use to lighten the load in some way. If not now, then down the road. So, and then finally, I'd like to hear from you and have a robust discussion. So, let's get to the strategies. Let's get to the meat of it. Well, one of them I introduce you to. It's kind of silly. I won't show you my silly dance, but I do have them. It's a tarantella if you want it. The first point, we have 15 strategies. The first one is laugh a lot. Laugh a lot. And if you're not naturally inclined, you need this more than most. We went out of our way to push ourselves. We weren't feeling it, but we pushed ourselves. We rented funny movies. We invited people over who we knew were funny. We avoided the Debbie the Downer types. We'd read a book, Norman Cousins wrote a book called Anatomy of an Illness. Anatomy of an Illness. Anyone ever heard of it? Well, not. Shouldn't be nice. Take care of you later. Anyway, in that book, this is written about 30, 40 years ago, but he was suffering from a cancer-like disease, And he was given up for lost. The doctor said, "You're finished. You can go home, die at home." And instead, he decided to totally immerse himself in humor. Laugh a minute, a yuck a minute. And just by doing that, and massive doses of vitamin C, he managed to save himself. Okay? Now, I don't want to make an over-hasty generalization and say that whatever ails you or your loved one, just laugh it off and you'll be fine. I wouldn't go that far, but I would say that laughing is healing. I don't think it's understood exactly why, whether it releases endorphins or what, but we went out of our way. And if somebody ever came up to us, and they did, they'd say, "Hey, look, I saw this great tearjerker. Don't watch As Good as It Gets. We got this great tearjerker for you." Or maybe they read a book. Has anybody ever heard of Sebastian Barry, the Irish writer? Well, you have now. He's a great contemporary writer, but he's Irish, so the books are heartbreaking. So if people suggested that to us, then we'd say, "Hold on now. We're on a sadness reduction diet. We're not going there. We want to laugh. We don't want to cry." So the simplest thing can change a moment, whether it's a clown nose or what. I'm not the kind of person, those who know me best can tell you I'm actually introverted. Give me a dog and a book and I'm pretty much all set. But we made a commitment to walking around with a smile on our face. Okay? So what's the second strategy? It's music fills the void. If your heart is breaking, try a different tune, a different song. Anybody remember what a Walkman is? Let's see, it's showing up. Quite a few of you remember what a Walkman is. Well, Bart, this is 3 or 4 months post-accident. Bart is still in a wheelchair. He's still not speaking. So we said, well, let's see how music works for him. We brought in a Walkman, put it on his head. He's fidgeting around with it. Nothing seems to be happening. And then finally, we see he's bopping. He's bopping. And we say, well, what is he bopping to? He's bopping to Tiny Dancer. It was the soundtrack from Almost Famous. And ever since, Tiny Dancer is a family favorite. And that reached him. Music reaches you very deeply. And all of us need that, especially in crisis. So what we recommended and what we did was we found our favorite songs. The songs that really put us in a hopeful frame of mind. We put them on CDs in those days. Now you could put them on a playlist. And we always had them ready. I mean, they were ready in the car. They were ready in the shower. You sang. If you didn't feel like singing out loud, you could sing it in your head. But you made yourself sing. I used to bring that CD, which had, probably these songs don't mean much to you. How can I keep from singing the old Quaker hymn? Or things like that, things that meant something to me. I used to bring it to work and play it quietly in the background. Now I'm retired. I just work for our foundation. And people would walk by and chuckle and say, "Crazy Joel, he's listening to sacred music." And sacred music is whatever brings you to that hopeful place. There's no magic formula for it. It could be Mozart or Motown, or Gilbert and Sullivan, or rap, whatever it is. Who is it that said, Duke Ellington said, "If it sounds good, it is good." So, the music, couldn't get by without it. And some of these things seem obvious, but you know, you're glum. You're in a terrible place. You're going to lose your son. He's gone. And maybe never coming back. So you play the music no matter how you feel. Okay. Third point, count one's blessings daily. Gratitude is the attitude. You may have heard that. Gratitude is the attitude. Now, when things are so bleak, and they were, that nothing comes to mind, I used to keep a journal by my bedstand and come up with 3 good things that happened that day. And sometimes they weren't happening. So you have to make them happen. Maybe you do a kindness for a stranger. That counts as a good thing. And it also shows you that you can still make your mark in the world. Who is it that said, if you want to make someone happy, be compassionate. And if you want to be happy, be compassionate. So, count one's blessings. The fourth one, I have difficulty with this one, but I have difficulty with a lot of them. The fourth one is live for the day. I'm a planner, I like to think about. I'm already thinking about what my vacation is going to be like, summer of 2023, you know, COVID willing, right? But when you're facing this kind of emergency, this long-term emergency, it's not something that's over in a snap, or even in a year or two. You have to learn to live for the day. Resist the seductive tendency to become overwhelmed with worrying about the future, or, on the other hand, being obsessed with the golden days of how great things used to be. Try to be like a marathon runner, focused on just the 1 mile at hand. Remember, today's the day. Today are the Olympics. Okay? It's not that you can't think about the future. You just don't want to fuss too much and fret too much and invest too much energy in it. There's not much you can do about it other than live today well. Now, if your mind stubbornly clings to these kinds of thoughts, and mine often did, you know, whatever I try, I'm still thinking about what might have been. My wife taught me this one. And then just say out loud, clear, cut, delete. I don't know if you guys even use Word, Microsoft Word anymore, but clear, cut, delete. It's part of editing, all right? Reboot your mind in a more positive direction. Okay, this one I did find easy. Number 5 is surround yourself with positive people. They're out there. We call this network of people out there the worldwide conspiracy of decency. And it has members in every community. Seek them out. They'll buck you up. They'll inspire by example. They'll keep you in psychological and spiritual training. So you'll be there for the ones that you're pulling for, the ones that really need you. The idea is to find people who keep you brave and strong, so you can be there for the one who's really counting on you. Now, number 6 is a corollary. I had 3 years of speech at the S39. I don't know if you can still tell, but I did. That didn't do me any harm. The corollary of surrounding yourself with positive people is to avoid negative people. Avoid negative people. Now, that sounds easier than it is, because the negative people may well be your family and your loved ones, right? They may just be Debbie the Downers, dour, toxic folk, right? Anybody remember Saturday Night Live, Debbie the Downer? Right? Some of you. Okay. Well, if these people make you feel lousy and take you down, they're going to sap your strength. You're in for a long, hard fight. And I should say that these kind of people often, they do what they do not out of malice. They're just, that's the way they are. They can't help themselves. If you find it too emotionally taxing to break off with these people altogether, then just cut down on the exposure time. See a little less of them. Okay? Number 7. And this is, some people have told me that this is the most important one. I'm not sure I go along with that, but it's very important. Make an inventory of community resources. Take out the paper and pencil, or probably in your case, a laptop, and ask yourself, what's available? How can I get help for my loved one, and for ourselves, and for the family? Now, I'm going to read, because I'll never remember them all. We actually went out and contacted. It's not just a list. It's a contact list. You then have to do the hard work of contacting them. All of the following: places of worship, the YMCA, colleges, school groups, fraternal groups, the Rotary, Elks, Scouts, therapy dogs, respite care, lawyers, and so on. We're members of over 70 Facebook groups around the subject of brain injury. So the job is to make a list and then reach out to these people. And don't just ask them, what can you do for my son, or my brother, or whomever. Ask them, what can my son do for you? Because you'll get the creative juices going that way. And we came up with solutions that we had no idea. We had absolutely no idea. We contacted Marist College. I know that's how should we say, Maris are the enemy at Siena, but we contacted Maris, and don't you know, they told us that some of the kids in the education department would be glad to spend most of Saturdays with Bart every week and do activities with him, maybe see a movie, maybe download some music, and so on. He's a big rock fan. And we had no idea that that resource was even there, but we asked. And Bart was able to help at certain community groups. There was, I forget what they were called, but it was a youth basketball league in town, and he was able to help out with that afterwards as well. Number 8, this, it's the end of this seems natural. Find a spiritual haven. No one is strong enough to fight this kind of fight purely by triumph of will. No one can do it. So find a nest, rather a wing to nestle under, a calm, safe place, a spiritual haven. Daily prayer for those inclined is best. I can't imagine getting by without it, but some people are not into it. So regular meditation, positive thinking, caregiving, visualization, and positive affirmation are good too. For some, it's inspirational music, poetry, and reading. Some people, I'm a history buff, and so I like to think about great historical figures and what they would have done in similar straits. It helps me. I don't know, again, show of hands. Anybody ever heard of the Antarctic explorer, Ernest Shackleton? Ernest Shackleton? Oh, we got a few. Well, can't go down that rabbit hole, but trust me, look him up, Ernest Shackleton. He's the greatest explorer of all time, I'll just say that. There's none greater. To find greater, you have to go to prehistory and read about guys like, Odysseus and the Iliad. He's simply the greatest. And when he was putting together his expedition to go across the Antarctic, this is pre-World War I, in a sailing ship, right? Wooden sailing ship. He put an ad in the London Times, and the gist of it was something like this. Crossing the Antarctic, chances of success very slim, chances of disaster, suffering, injury, and death very high. Pay negligible, but if we succeed, there'll be glory. Who wants to answer that ad? It turns out 5,600 people applied for the jobs. He only had 22 jobs to fill. So he says in his memoirs, Ernest Shackleton, he says, well, how do you pick 22 out of 5,600? He said, it didn't pay to even look at their technical qualifications, since they were all superbly qualified. He said, and frankly, technical qualifications won't keep you alive where we're going. Where we're going, only optimism will keep you alive. Where we're going, only optimism will keep you alive. And I found myself saying that time and time again in the teeth of a very hard reality. That only optimism will keep you alive. So that's part of my spiritual haven. The next one I really had a hard time with, and maybe you guys will do better if and when the time comes. It's to forgive. It's best to forgive, though most of us feel the impulse only waveringly, if at all. I harbored real fury, actually, at the boys involved in the accident and at their families who glibly went on with their lives without giving us a moment's thought. And that tormented me for years. When I finally found my way to forgiving them and wishing them only the best, it was like laying down a heavy burden. And I would say that forgiving gets, like most everything else in life, it gets easier with practice. 110, take care of yourself. Take care of yourself. Consider vitamins, meditation, yoga, regular exercise. Keep yourself together. There's no shame in going to a therapist or a doctor for help with depression or anxiety or sleeplessness. I reached for years into the medicine cabinet for a father's little helper. Okay? For years. And I don't think this crowd knows what B&B is, Benedictine and brandy. But that was also a part of my formulary. Of course, you should rest when you can. Rest is not really just optional, it's a necessity. You're gonna run out of gas. This whole thing is too intense. Every day is a crisis. Most days there's a setback. All right? So find a way to rest. They talk about zip napping. I'm now an insomniac, so I'm not much good at zip napping. But you can do zip vacations. Get somebody to cover you just for the night and get away. Okay? The Maris Companions, that's how that came up. They were several hours every week. Now, this next point, from my point of view, is the most important of all of them. It's stay open-minded. Think outside the box. Remember Socratic humility. Now, Socrates, the gist of what he said was, he said, I'm wiser than the others to this little extent, that I do not think I know what I do not know. I do not think I know what I do not know. Now, most of us find taking that stance almost impossible. We think we know what we know, okay? But I'm advising you to stay open-minded, think outside the box. Many medical and other practitioners at the height of their career are simply too busy to even consider alternatives. And it falls to us to at least explore alternative therapies, emerging technologies, and to keep abreast of which ones may actually hold promise. Remember Hippocrates' principle, do no harm. Do no harm, although it may not always be possible. In our case, unconventional alternative therapies transform Bart's life. That's no exaggeration to say that. A neuropsych exam given to him several years after the injury, the neuropsych said that he'd never seen such improvement in someone so profoundly injured. And he said, well, how do you do it? And we told him. Hyperbaric oxygen, craniosacral therapy, neurofeedback, nutraceutical supplementation, especially omega-3 fish oils. Dale's got the resource sheet that'll give you a sense, a more detailed sense of that. I want to harp on this point a little because I said it's the most important. And I want to say, and I'm no different from the rest of you, I became an alternative therapy advocate simply because the alternative to it wasn't working. They'd already given us their verdict. It's the nursing home, okay? So it was the heavy-handed necessity that drove me to that. Otherwise, I was like my friends Sal and Vic. I have a couple of friends, Sal and Vic. They're tailors. They're Italian, and they are fine tailors. And they saved all their money to take a grand trip of Italy, spend 6 weeks traveling around. They were fixing to retire. They were my age. And by good luck, they ended up in the Vatican, and there was a lottery, and one of them was picked to be part of an audience with the Pope. And Sal says to Vic, well, you go ahead. Vic, you go on and you tell me what it's like. So there's an audience, a half hour or so. Vic comes back out to Sal, and Sal says, so, what was his holiness like? He says, well, I would say he's like a 44 short. That's all we could see. Get out of the box. We're all in that box with him. I don't really know them. That's a joke. Okay. But I know that we're all Sal and Vic, or Sally and Victoria. Right? Okay. Point 12. Learn patience. This one I was definitely not good at. Learn patience, brick by brick. The TBI wars have no decisive battle. There's no one big battle we can have. I wish there were, even if it was do or die. I'm glad for the chance. But there is no such field of battle. There's just an endless stream of skirmishes. And you have to learn patience. And you have to learn to take this gargantuan challenge, this catastrophic problem, and break it down into smaller pieces, smaller units that maybe you can handle. And there may be a few that are so tough you can't handle. You have to circle back to them later. But you have to scale the monster down to size. You have to learn to be patient. Meanwhile, you try to be of good cheer and keep plugging. You try to get through the day. When things were unbearable, I used to say to myself, well, look, before long the day is over, and tomorrow will be another chance to rise and shine. Don't get bogged down in the big picture and what it all means. Focus on the task at hand. After all, we rebuild our family's life one brick at a time. We keep on going. Even on the worst days, I used to tell myself, well, I know it's worth it. I'm a better person because of it, even if I didn't believe it. Point 13, this is a good one. Happy helpers. Happy helpers, okay? What that is designate friends and neighbors to help out, right? Ask them. Let them sweat the small stuff. Let them pick up the shopping or pick up the younger kids at the practices and leave you free time to focus on what's really important. Happy helpers can help by shopping or preparing meals. They can even write emails or Facebook updates, which is a chore from those of us who are in the trenches, having to keep all these hundreds of people who love Bart, who are interested in Bart, up to date. That's pretty tough sledding. If you can get somebody else to do it, by all means, get them to do it. Folks are anxious to help. Sometimes they don't come forward. Not everyone is anxious to help, obviously. But sometimes they don't come forward because they're embarrassed or they don't know how to approach it. They don't know what to say. But you really should count on the fact that most people want that. You need to ask them. Right? They're looking for a way. They need food for the soul. Just like we all do. Okay. Number 14. Do something nice for yourself. And that's a pleasant enough thing. So whatever it is, it could be taking a hot bath, or a walk through nature, a lunch with a friend, a massage, some kind of special treat. I have it on good advice from my wife, Dale, that chocolate works very well. I'm not a chocolate guy, but if it works for you, God bless.
I wouldn't mind.
Yeah. So do something nice. The last point, number 15, and then we'll take a little break. We certainly want to hear from you. We want questions. Bart and Joel me for questions. I'm just going to read from the book because this is the last paragraph of the book, and I think it says it as well as I know how to say it. Above all, seek daily doses of good and beautiful things at one's fingertips. When you're up to your eyeballs, renew your zest for living, your appreciation of life's small sweetness and small pleasures. Make time to play with the dog, to smell the flowers, listen to your favorite music, catch up with a friend, or contemplate nature's beauty. The Hudson Valley is bursting with natural splendors, rivers, mountains, and orchards of plenty. But no matter where you live, whatever your aesthetic preferences, heed the poet's words. Earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. But only he who sees takes his shoes off. The rest sit around it and pick blackberries. That's it. Thank you.